Hey everyone, Ashley Mailloux here with the Daily Racing Form. We're going to take a look at Saturday at Los Alamitos, their ninth race. Their final race on the card is the $100,000 Bertrando Stakes for California bred or California sired 3-year-olds and upward, going a mile. And we know at Los Al they do have that long stretch. And just looking at Bertrando as a racehorse, what a horse. Made over $3 million in his career. No luck really in the Breeders' Cup, though, in terms of trips to the winner's circle. Was second in the Classic, I believe, in '93, and a couple of years before that was second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So a fun horse to watch, a really, really great Cal bred. But we'll look at this field for this year's edition. A field of 6 will go postward. The big name in here may be Kings River Knight, but also Desmond Doss, 3-1 on the morning line. Lovesick Blues, very impressive in those last couple outings. They've done kind of everything with him in terms of dirt or turf, and he's been able to show up. So as I mentioned, a field of 6. We'll start on the rail with the number 1, None Above the Law. This one out of the Peter Miller barn was recently raced in the Crystal Water, and just kind of looking at that race, it's a key race. You can see Kings River Knight exits it, Kalinga Road as well. And this horse, it was just a lot of these horses returning off of that performance back on May 28th at Santa Anita. And the big thing, it was a mile. The distance was right, but it was on the turf. And just looking at this one was kind of forwardly placed, pressing the pace and really applying pressure to the pace setter, but faltered in the stretch to finish 5th, beaten by 6 lengths. Now, maybe None Above the Law needed a race. We hadn't seen him since Del Mar in the fall, where he was able to finish 4th in the Cary Grant. But it's been a while, I think, when I see horses like this since they've made it to the winner's circle for him. To go all the way down the page to 2021, even though he's working well, more of a wait and a see approach for me. But Peter Miller, we know he puts big numbers up kind of wherever he goes out in California. The number 2, Desmond Doss, that's one of the Steve Miotti barn. We'll take a look at his most recent performance, which actually was on the dirt, going 7/8 in the grade 2 triple bend. And he had a couple of horses beaten early on. You can't miss him here. He's the number 2. He's the gray horse. You can see him with his blinkers on. And also the 5 we'll point out in here is Positivity. And I think looking at the top 2 in here, Spirit of McKenna is a very, very classy horse. I think we still haven't necessarily seen his best. And CZ Rocket, he's getting older, but man, he's made a lot of money in his career. He's a hard-knocking type. And I thought Desmond Doss obviously gets, underneath and ends up 3rd in the race. I thought it was a good performance, though, a 91 Buyer speed figure. And the interesting thing is he's going to stretch out to a mile. Looking at the distance in the past, it's been perfect for him. I think a little added distance should help him. And he's just making his 3rd start since September. So I think he's got a lot of upside. And certainly the talent's there. I know in those 2 appearances this year, yet to win, but look at last year. He did have 2 wins, and they were both pretty nice efforts. Now, the number 3, Kings River Knight. This is the morning line favorite. 8-5 is that morning line odds on him, and he was the winner of the Crystal Waters. Just looking at the trip that he got, going a mile on the turf, gate to wire. It was a pretty easy performance. He tried to do the same thing back in March in the Sensational Star and was just simply second best. Got nosed out in the end. To see him kind of take a couple months off and come back, it was a good effort. The question, though, is the dirt. I mean, looking at him, you go down the page, he just has that one lone dirt start, and it's how he kicked off his career. Now, he was second, and he was making up some ground. It was a good performance, and it was early, so I don't want to read too much into the Buyer speed figure, but it seems like they've been very strategic with keeping him on the turf and keeping it on the synthetic, even at Golden Gate. It's interesting to see him move over, but maybe part of that logic is also just the way that he's been working over the main track. He's had some really quick works. They're going to try something different with him in here at Los Al. The number 4, Kalinga Road, this one out of the Carla Gaines barn, also exit the Crystal's Water, where this one was second, beaten by 2 1/4 lengths. Looking at kind of his form and going down the page, typically he's closing from off the pace. Can be a little bit more tactical and rate and just sit off of it. It's typically rolling, and you can see it was a little closer last time out, but it was a compact field of 5, and I think that changed the strategy because when you go back 2 and 3 starts, this horse has always been at the back of the pack and rolling. Now, in terms of getting this one back on the dirt, it's interesting. I know looking at his last dirt effort, necessarily wasn't planned to be on the dirt and it was going a mile and an eighth, but he raced pretty well in that allowance race. General Mathis ended up being the winner. I know this horse went off favored, but he does have some good dirt efforts under his belt. But when you go to his record, it's typically for minor placings. You can see he is 9 for 11 the money, but just 1 for 11 in terms of wins. The number 5, Lovesick Blues. We'll take a look at his effort 2 back. I wanted to kind of pick a dirt race rather than that most recent turf effort where he was 3rd, but Going back to May 7th at Santa Anita, in this allowance optional claiming event, he was not in for the tag. And in terms of tripping here, he goes off at odds about 2-1 or so in here. He was dead last early on, and he started rolling late in here. You can see he's the number 4, and he's just going to go blow by everyone here in the stretch. He keeps the task in the stretch, ends up winning by just over a length. He's got to kind of hold off some closing horses that are trying to make up ground, but I thought this was a great effort. It was going 6.5 furlongs. You go down the page. He's proven on the dirt, and a lot of his races have, kind of when you look at them, about half of them have been on the dirt. He's a 5-time winner on the surface. I think he's got some upside in here on the surface, which even though he raced really well last time, his dirt form is extremely strong. And this is the other one in here for trainer Steve Miotti. Then rounding out the field, the number 6, Positivity. We saw this one in the Triple Bend, really didn't have much to offer in the stretch, but prior to that, I actually raced pretty well in the Kona Gold, considering the layoff that he was running off of. It was over a year layoff. It was closer to almost 14 months, almost when it was said and done, and he finished 3rd behind Brickyard Ride, an Anarchist who came back to win, but I thought he fell flat, and sometimes we do see horses kind of that second off such a long layoff. They can either move up or they bounce, and I think sometimes the bounce is something to note. Now he's going to make his 3rd start off the layoff. I think he's got the dirt experience, has been able to close in the past. Maybe he can get a share in here, but a little reserved with his most recent performance. But that's the field of 6 for this year's edition of the Bertrando. And I'm going to try to get a little clever in here. I know Kings River Knight has raced really well in those last 2 efforts, but they've both been on the turf. It's been a while since he's been on the dirt. So I go to the number 2, Desmond Doss. I think looking at this 7-year-old son of Grayson, he's coming out of the Triple Bend. This is certainly a softer spot. He's going to stretch out in distance. I think he's proven to be pretty, competitive at the mile distance in the past. And even just looking at his performances at Los Alamitos Racecourse, he's 3 for 4 in the money, 2 of which were wins. I like him. I think 3-1. If we got that, that'd probably be a good price on the morning line. So I go with him on top. For second, I did go to Kings River's Knight. Just really hard to knock off of his last 2 efforts, but he's going to have to handle the surface switch. Then the 5, Lovesick Blues. I think he's a horse that could take respect in here, just knowing he's got such a strong dirt record. That effort 2 back, he looked very good winning. He's going to have to step up, but he was able to handle stakes competition on a different surface last time out. And then rounding it out, I mentioned the 6, Positivity. Slightly intrigued on him stretching out to a mile, but was really not impressed with his last performance off, second off that long layoff. So I used him further down in 4th. But for me, the number 2, Desmond Doss is my top pick in this year's edition of the Bertrando. Good luck.